بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا بيننا شقيا ولا محروما إنك ولي ذلك والقادر عليه. So for those who were with us from the beginning, we talked about Fiqh al-Tahara, okay, which is the understanding how to purify oneself, be it al-hadath al-asghar or al-hadath al-akbar, the situation that requires wudu versus situation that requires complete ghusl. So we covered that. And then we talked about the salah, we talked about pillars, which is arkan, we talked about wajibat, obligatory acts, right? And today, inshallah, we'll talk about sunan. We'll also touch upon some of the mistakes that some of us make in our salah. We'll also talk about salah during travel. Salah during travel. These questions come up all the time. So inshallah, we'll cover as much of that as possible. So just to do a quick review, let's talk about the conditions of salah. And all of you should know this. Okay, what is the first condition to salah? Islam. First condition is Islam. Salah is not accepted from anybody who is a non-Muslim. Next, aql. The person has to be sane. Third, tamyiz. Tamyiz means that being able to distinguish right from wrong, which is typically the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, teach your children to pray at the age of 7, and when they reach 10, then you need to discipline them if they're not, praying. 4, إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا. So it has to be what? The time. 5th, ومن حيث خرجت فولي وجهك شطر المسجد الحرام. Okay, so you have to face the Qibla. Okay? And then standing up in salah for those who are able to. So there's just a quick review. So if someone who is a non-Muslim prays, well, good for you, but it's not accepted. Because saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah is a prerequisite for the acceptance of any deed. Okay? Oh, of course, the intention. Yes, the intention is that you don't join the crowd and then say, oh, I think it's Salat al-Dhuhr or I think it's Salat al-Asr, right? So you have to have the intention, and the intention has to be before any act begins. So this applies to Salah, Siyam, Zakah, Hajj, any deed, any deed you offer. Intention has to be there. Okay, what if I come into the masjid, it looks like dark enough, let me pray, Allahu Akbar, and then I began to pray Maghrib. But I'm not really sure it's time for Maghrib yet or not. Is that accepted? No, it's not. You have to be certain. You have to be certain that the time has come. Okay? Anybody has any questions, please feel free. While we're on the subject matter, like we're talking about conditions, we address that first. Okay? Now let's talk about pillars, which is arkan as-salah. And we said the pillars are how many? 14. We have 14 pillars. And we said 10 out of the 14 are actions, while 4 are statements. So 10 are actions, 4 are statements. Okay? So when we stand up, line up for salah, the first rukn is what? Takbirat al-ihram. What about if I raise my hands? Is that a rukn? No. That's a sunnah. Raising the hands, we said it's a sunnah, but saying Allahu Akbar is a rukn. So that's the first one. And then, al-qiyam ma'al istita'a. You have to be in a stand-up position. وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. Stand up in your salah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we talk about qiyam, takbirat al-ihram, okay, and then Surah Al-Fatiha. La salata biduni fatihat al-kitab. One who does not recite the Fatiha, their salah is void, not accepted. Okay? Number 4, ruku'. Okay? I need more participation, inshallah, for those who are with us. Ruku'. Okay? And then 5, rising from ruku'. Okay? 6, standing up. So I say this, why? Because you cannot be in ruku' and then Sami Allahu liman hamda Rabbana lakal hamd, and then so you're in a motion. So you rise and you stand up back to your original position, okay? And then now we're at 7, right? 7 is what? Sujood, okay? And then 8, sitting, rising from sujood, okay? And 9, التشهد الأخير, the last tashahhud. At number 10, taslim, okay? And also there is, so taslim is verbal. We're just covering the actionable now, right? So tashahhud is verbal. Sitting for tashahhud is a rukn, okay? So that is a rukn. Taslim is a rukn, right? But it's verbal, it's not actionable, okay? So achieving khushu' in every step is also a rukn, because we get the reward for our salah proportionate to the level of khushu' we achieve. So if someone achieves 0 khushu' in their salah, what happens? They get 0 reward. And we know this from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when the man walked into the masjid and he basically prayed, then he went to greet the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ answered and they said, "Irji' fasalli fa innaka lam tusalli." Go back and pray, you did not pray. Okay? He didn't say you didn't pray right, he said you did not pray. So if someone achieves 0 khushu' in their salah, because they're just busy with the motions, they get 0 reward. And in fact, they could be punished for that salah as well. They could be punished for that salah. The Prophet ﷺ sent this man 3 times to pray, and then the 3rd time the man said, "O Prophet of Allah, teach me. This is all I know. This is all I know." So what are the verbal arkan? The rukn that is verbal, saying Allahu Akbar, okay? Because if one prays without takbirat al-ihram, what happens? They're not praying, they have not entered salah, okay? Recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha, okay? We said taslim and التشهد الأخير, the last tashahhud. Now التشهد الأخير, اللهم صل تحية الله والصلاة الطيبة السلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Okay, so this is the tashahhud. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم. This is sunnah. This is sunnah. What about the middle tashahhud in Salat al-Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha? It's a wajib. So it's a wajib. Why is it important to distinguish between a rukn and a wajib? Absolutely, because we make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Nobody is exempted from that. And when we make the mistakes, right, we need to know how to correct them. Okay? So that's with respect to the rukn. Now the wajib, again, we're just doing a quick review here. The wajibat are how many? 8. We said 8. There are 8 wajibat. Okay? And pretty much all of them are verbal. All of them are verbal. So all the takbirat, aside from takbirat al-ihram, is wajib. Okay? Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, when we are in ruku' is wajib. Sami Allahu liman hamidah, Rabbana lakal hamd. Okay? That's a wajib. Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, in sujood, is a wajib. Rabbi ghfirli, between the 2 sajdas, that's a wajib. The middle tashahhud is a wajib. So you can see the wajib is all, right, it's all verbal. Okay? What if I miss a wajib and I'm in a rukn now? Let's say I forgot to do the middle tashahhud. And I stood up, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Uh-oh, what do I do now? I continue, why? Because I'm in a rukn. And the rukn is higher than the wajib. Okay? The rukn, you have to rectify. The wajib, sujood al-sahw will rectify it for you. Okay? That's why it's important, you know. So what if I miss a rukn? Let's say I missed ruku' and I went to the sujood. I'll go back to, okay. What if I forgot and I did my sujood twice and then I stood up and I began to recite? What do I do? I forgot to do my ruku', and I did my 2 sajdas, and I stood up to bring the next rak'ah, to pray the next rak'ah. So you omit that rak'ah. That rak'ah is no good now. And then you replace it. Okay? So you don't go back to it because you started a new rak'ah. You started a new rak'ah. What if I'm in my salah and I notice that my garment has najasa on it, my sock, whatever? What do? I take it off and I continue praying. That happened with the Prophet ﷺ. He noticed there was najasa on his abaya, right? He took it off and he continued praying. Okay? What if someone's awrah is exposed, throughout their salah? Their salah is invalid. And that's where we have to be careful, especially now comes the summer. People wear t-shirts, right? Pants, sometimes shorts that are not long enough, so they're not covering their awrah. And oftentimes I see this frequently. People go into sujood, and then the awrah in the back, they're not paying attention, that is showing. Okay? That nullifies your salah. There's a difference between the awrah being exposed for a brief period of time and the awrah being exposed the entire time. There's a huge difference there. For a brief period of time, you cover it, you're good. For an extended period of time, no, it's not good. What are some of the mistakes that people make in their salah? How many rukn, how many limbs do we make sujood on? 7. So some of the scholars asked about those who do sujood tilawa. Familiar with sujood tilawa? There are about 13, 14 places in the Quran where there is sujood tilawa. So someone will be holding the Quran, and when they make their sujood, right, they still holding the Quran, they're making their sujood, and the back of their hand is on the floor. The scholars said this doesn't count. There's no sajda here. So therefore, some people, when they make their sujood, literally their feet are off the floor. That's not sujood. That is not sujood. Cannot say I just made sujood. Because the sujood can only be on 7 limbs. It has to be on 7 limbs. Sometimes people make sujood and they're crossing their feet. That is not counted. That is not sujood. They're just grown accustomed to that, and they just carry on for years and years and years, and they don't realize that they're making these mistakes. The nose and the forehead is 1 limb. It's considered 1. The hands with the fingers in the direction of the Kaaba. So don't go like this. Okay, your hands are flat on the floor. On your knees, right? And then on your toes, right? And then at-tamkeen, meaning that, don't be rocking while you're making your sujood. You don't want to be rocking. And don't make what is known to be sujood al-kalb, the sajda of the dog, which is the entire arm and hand is on the floor. That is wrong. We said it's on the hands, the knees, the toes, and the forehead. Yes.
Sometimes, there's a lot of Muslim brothers that they stand together and so tight. You can open your hands like correctly in a sunnah way. So what about that?
You don't have to. But that does not interfere with your hands touching the floor. No, but what I'm saying is that you may not be able to open your elbows, and you should not if there are people next to you, right? Just open it within reason, okay? Which is basically the width of your body, right? If you're by yourself, you can open them a little more. It's not a problem. What if you're praying, and you felt like something really, came out of you? Some wind or whatever, but you're not sure. What do? Continue praying. Absolutely. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, if you feel something and you're not certain, continue praying, because sometimes it's from Satan. Sometimes this is from Satan. Okay? So what if I miss a wajib? What do I do now? I'm shorted my salah. I missed my middle tashahhud. That's a wajib. Sujood is sahu. How do we make sujood is sahu? So once you finish your tahiyyat, right? Then do you do it before taslim or after taslim? Before taslim, because I've shortened my salah. I missed the wajib, right? What if I increase something in my salah? Or I had a doubt and I'm not sure, whether I did something correctly or not. What do I do? So as a rule of thumb, if there's an increase, sujood al-sahw after taslim. If there's a decrease, sujood al-sahw is before taslim. If you're in doubt and then you realize, no, I did the right thing, then you make sujood al-sahw then taslim. If you're not sure, you're still in doubt, you do taslim and then sujood al-sahw. But there's room here. It's not, a make or break, if you will. Twice. Sajdatayn. But there is no tahiyyat after sujood al-sahw. There is no tahiyyat after sujood al-sahw. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. That's it. Because I'm done with my salah, I'm doing sujood al-sahw to rectify the wrong that I've done. So it's 2 sajdas, no tahiyyat. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Let's talk a little bit about the sunan. And there are many, many sunan. Some are actionable, some are verbal. Okay? What are some of the sunan? Raf' al-yadayn. Okay? And what are the places of raising the hands? No, the places in the salah. Like when do I raise my hands? No, takbirat al-ihram first thing. Takbirat al-ihram. And then going into ruku', coming up from ruku', and then coming up from middle tashahhud. So Salat al-Fajr doesn't have middle tashahhud, so there's only 3. But in the rest of the salawat, there are 4. Okay, when the Imam says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, what do I say? Okay, it is also the sunnah to say, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida. And we said that if you omit a sunnah intentionally or unintentionally, it does not nullify your salah. But if you omit a wajib intentionally, what happens? That nullifies your salah. Because you've done it intentionally, means that you're not taking your salah seriously. So yes, the wajib is less than the rukn, but this is not something to be compromised. Intentionally, of course. Okay? So we cannot compromise our salah by neglecting a wajib intentionally. What are some other sunan? The witr, it doesn't matter if you're praying witr or you're praying obligatory salah, right? You raise your hands in the places that we mentioned. It's okay, don't worry about it.
You sure?
We'll just make it interactive tonight. Jazakallah khair. But you're still going to get a quiz. Inshallah. Yes, inshallah. We'll do inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Okay, what are some other sunan? So when we say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim in ruku', the first time is wajib. The other 2 or more is sunnah. And then you can say other things, right? We said, the same thing in, like, for example, saying Rabbana wa kal hamd, right? Once, right? And then حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه ملء السماوات وملء الأرض وملء ما بينهما, right? So all this can be more. And when you're making your ruku', Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, right? Subhanallah wa bihamdih adada khalqihi wa rida nafsih wa zinata arshihi wa midad. That's also, sunnah. So you can increase, because all of our salah is dhikr. All of our salah is dhikr. In other words, say, when I go into ruku', I say Allahu Akbar. Like Allahu Akbar should last the entire motion. And the same thing, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida. It lasts the entire motion. So every moment in our salah is an act of dhikr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every moment is an act of dhikr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or are some other sunan? Put in the right on the left. Raising your, you can put your hands down if you want. Okay? Same thing in sujood, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, the first one is a wajib, right? And then, saying it more than once is a sunnah. In between the two sajdas, Rabbi ghfirli once is a wajib. But then you mention the dua, Rabbi ghfirli warhamni wahdini wajburni wa'afini warzuqni warfa'ni. Yeah, this is a very comprehensive dua. And imagine you saying this in every salah, in every rak'ah. So it's a lot of dua. Okay? And of course, add to that many other sunan, but I want to fast forward a little bit in the interest of time just to cover, the travel of salah. Okay? So, in our salah, what did the Prophet ﷺ say after the last tashahhud? What do we do? After Salat al-Ibrahimiyya, what do? We make dua. We make dua, right? Because we prayed all of that, right? And now at the end of the salah, we make our dua. What are some of the dua that the Prophet ﷺ has taught us? After tahiyyah. He just mentioned it, but he just needs to finish it. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب القبر وقنا فتنة المحيا والممات وقنا فتنة المسيح الدجال. So these are, isti'adah from all these things that the Prophet ﷺ has taught us, and that's very, very, very important. And then of course we can make other dua. We can make our dua. But if we are behind the Imam, okay, we need to be with the Imam. I don't mean with the Imam doing the same motion, meaning that قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما جعل الإمام ليؤتم به. The Imam is there so you can follow, right? You heard me, right? What did I just say? All right, so pay attention, inshallah, all of you. I feel like I'm in a high school or something. All right. إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُؤْتَمَّ بِهِ. So if someone intentionally, right, like for example, I'm standing behind the Imam and the Imam even said Allahu Akbar, and I come here and say Allahu Akbar. And then the Imam says Allahu Akbar. I'm not following the Imam. Okay, so my salah is invalid. If you do that, if you are ahead of the Imam, you invalidate your salah. If you're doing that intentionally, you validate your salah. Okay? It is not recommended that you be with the Imam either. In other words, the Imam is saying a lot of dhikr in the salah. So when the Imam says, Sami Allahu liman hamida, when I hear that last word, I get up. Rabbana wa lakal hamd. That means I'm following now. That means I am following. So إنما جعل الإمام ليتبع. The Imam is there so you can follow the Imam. So you cannot be ahead of the Imam, you cannot be equal with the Imam. Okay? And then the same thing, when the Imam rises from sujood, Allahu Akbar, when you hear Akbar, then you begin to rise from sujood. Sometimes people are like instead of ruku' and they're watching the Imam. The sunnah is that your eyesight is where? Place of sujood. So you focus, you concentrated on what you are saying. Okay? The last scenario, which is number 4, is that, which is again, if you do that intentionally, that could invalidate your salah. Is that the Imam said, Sami Allahu liman hamidah, and you're still busy with your dhikr. Right? And then the Imam, Allahu Akbar, and going to sujood, and you still haven't stood up. Right? That's a huge mistake. That is a huge mistake. So you have to always make sure you're just listening to the Imam. The moment he's done, that's a signal for you to follow. So you don't go ahead of the Imam, you do not go equal with the Imam, you follow the Imam, and you don't wait too long that the Imam is now in a rukn that is different from the rukn that you're in. That means you're not following. Any questions on this issue?
I have a question. So when the Imam's stand, like he was after ruku, so we have to wait until he's done completely, or we can do at the same time?
So you're not watching the Imam. I mean, we have, let's say, 10 rows, right? And I'm in row number 4 or 5, right? And the Imam is going, Sami Allahu liman hamida, right? I'm still in ruku', right? I hear the word hamida, I rise and say, Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Or I would say, Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa lakal hamd. So the Imam, when he speaks, Whether you see him or you don't, that's a signal for you, now it's time for you to follow. And then, of course, the imam also needs to be careful. You know, sometimes the imam can be very slow or could have reached an old age, right? So they have to be very careful, especially when they go into sujood. They say Allahu Akbar, and then a young person is already in sujood. So that's the mistake of the imam. That is the mistake of the imam, and that needs to be brought up to their attention, because not everybody can see the imam. If you're in a masjid where you have 500 people praying outside, people praying right in a different level, and here the imam is taking his time going to sujood, then that's his fault. Okay? So if the imam is as an older person or whatever, then they would basically Allahu Akbar, just to make sure that they're ahead of everybody. Make sense? But what did we say? What is the signal? The signal is that the imam said Allahu Akbar, right? So when you hear Akbar, then you proceed now. You should not be watching the imam. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yep.
I'm sorry. About the Surah Al-Fatiha.
Yes.
What is the good time to recite it after Imam? I mean, when he said Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, he can recite after that.
So there's a difference of opinion among the scholars, and I'm not here to settle the difference of opinion, but I will tell you the different opinions. Okay? So the first opinion, particularly in Salah Jahriyah, when the imam recites out loud. And by the way, reciting out loud is a sunnah. We're talking about Maghrib, Isha, and Fajr. Reciting quietly Dhuhr and Asr is also a sunnah. So in other words, if someone wants to teach their students and they pray in Asr and they begin to recite Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, no one should say Subhanallah. No, he can do it. He's doing something different from the sunnah, but it's not a no-no. Especially if he's teaching the students. Okay, so reciting out loud in the night salahs is a sunnah. Reciting quietly, Dhuhr and Asr, is a sunnah. Okay, so it's why sometimes you see people like they walk into the masjid after Salat al-Maghrib and they're praying quietly. They're not following the sunnah exactly, but no one can say that the salah is wrong. No one can say their salah is wrong. So, going back to Surah Al-Fatiha, some of the scholars said that saying Ameen is sufficient. In other words, you don't have to recite with the Imam or after the Imam. Okay? You should not be reciting with the Imam, you can recite after. So, again, just saying Ameen, just like the dua. Not every dua the Imam makes you say the same dua, you just say Ameen. Right? So those who relied on this opinion, they basically said all of Surah Al-Fatiha is a dua. Right? So when we say Ameen, then as if we recited Surah Al-Fatiha. Some said no, you recite fi sakatat al-Imam. Means that when the Imam says Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, now you say it. And of course you don't recite like the Imam, you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki. If the Imam is going fast, when he finishes, he can recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Even though in the Quran it says, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. Many of the scholars said that this is just for the Salah. But the exception to that, see, we have many, many rules in Islam, and we have exceptions as well. Right? So the exception to that is that you ascribe to the opinion that says you need to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay? So you recite it while the Imam is reciting another surah. Because reciting another surah is a sunnah. Right? Reciting Surah Al-Fatiha is a rukn, but reciting any other surah or group of ayat after Surah Al-Fatiha, that is a sunnah. That is a sunnah. Does that answer your question? Okay, inshallah.
Whenever I did Surah Al-Fatiha after Imam, I was just thinking, there's a hadith in Quran that, when someone is reading the Quran, you have to listen to them
Yes, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا. But we said, right, you are listening. The fact that you are reciting after every ayah the Imam recites, it shows that you're listening. And you're repeating what the Imam is saying. So that is listening. In fact, some scholars said that you cannot just leave the Quran playing in your home or in your car and you're busy doing other things. You either turn it on and listen or turn it off. But again, there are opinions that say it's okay. It's okay to talk while the Quran is playing. I don't really ascribe to that opinion. Because, I mean, you know, these are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any other questions? In Salat al-Asr? Yeah, so you don't hear the Imam reciting. You know, again, some scholars, yeah, I ascribe to the opinion that you need to recite Surah Al-Fatiha.
No, I'm asking why Dhuhr and Asr, Imam doesn't shout and recite. Silently reciting the Alhamdulillah.
They recite it silently, right? Right, so you recite silently too.
What is the reason?
Why is that? What's the reason for the Imam reciting quietly? That's how the Prophet ﷺ taught us to pray.
They know reason.
That's, you know, that's why we say al-ibadat tawqifiyya. Tawqifiyya means that we have no right to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except until we verify that this worship is we've been commanded to do. Right? So we cannot add, delete, omit all of that in our ibadah because we feel like it. No. No, we can't do that. Make sense? Okay. Let's just cover a couple of things with tahara. Okay? So, this is because this is really important, especially when you're traveling on an airplane. Right? You know, some people ascribe to the fact that, you know, they claim, there's no evidence to that. Someone has the evidence, please bring it forth. Right? They claim that the Prophet ﷺ used to wear leather socks and leather boots. But there's really no evidence to show that. Khuf, which is known as, like what we refer to as boots now, that is a possibility. Was made out of skin animal, could have been made out of other materials, right? So they basically say, mash, wiping on the feet can only be on leather socks. But those who make that claim, there were no leather socks at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, nothing that we know about. Those who make that claim, when they wear their leather socks, they're not actually leather socks. What are they? They're synthetic socks, right? So if you buy your wife a diamond ring, and you say, oh, these are diamond rings, it's beautiful, it's just for you. She says, these are real diamonds? No, synthetic. What? Right? So they're not real diamonds, right? Can't say this synthetic gold. Is it so, you know, you're ascribing to an opinion that you're not following. Okay? The fact of the matter, I don't know of one single scholar that said you cannot wipe off on your socks. With conditions. The first condition is that you wear them on tahara, be it wudu or ghusl. Okay? Meaning that you washed your feet. Okay? And if you are not traveling, then you can pray 5 salawat in it. So one day and one night, which is 5 salats. Okay? And then they basically said that the socks cannot be so thin that you can see your skin, as if you're not wearing socks. And the third condition, they need to be above the ankle. So these very short socks that people keep on going like this to stretch them, can't really wipe on these. Why? Because they have to cover, you know, the foot up to the ankle. And the same thing if you're wiping off on your shoes, you know, these boots that cover the ankle, that's perfectly fine. You can wipe off on that. But if you take them out, if you take them off, and you come to the masjid, and you pray, and then you leave, and then you lost your wudu, you put them on, right? You cannot wipe off on them again. You can wipe on your socks. Because we said the condition of you being able to wipe on your boots or your socks is that you wore them on the original ghusl. Here, ghusl of your feet, not the entire ghusl. So that could be your wudu, could be your entire ghusl. Make sense? What happens if I change my socks? I still have my wudu, I just changed my socks. I haven't lost my wudu. I can pray. Taking off my socks, just like taking off my shoes that I wiped off on, right? That covered up to the ankle. That does not nullify my wudu. But if I change my socks and I lose my wudu now, okay, I changed my socks. I haven't lost my wudu yet. I just changed my socks. Now I went to work, and while I'm at work, I lost my wudu. Now I need to make my wudu. Do I wipe on my socks or do I take them off? Why? Because we said that condition for you to wipe on your socks or your shoes is that you wore them on ghusl. So the first pair I wore on ghusl, the second one not. Right? Make sense? That confuses a lot of people. Just ask yourself a question. Did I wear my socks on ghusl or is it something I wiped off on? I can change my socks so long that I have not lost my wudu and pray again, no problem. But the moment I lose my wudu, now I cannot wipe on the new socks.
Let's take the example. I'm at work, I do my wudu in the bathroom, and people are in and out. Everybody's working at work. So I just wipe.
So long that you wear your socks on your original wudu. Yeah, absolutely. You made your wudu at home, and then you went to work, right? And that's very important, by the way, especially living in the Western world or traveling on an airplane or train, and the little sink, in the airplane, you're trying to put your foot in the sink, and just basically water is everywhere. That's a rukhsah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a gift. So we don't need to complicate things, right?
It's not like, okay, make wudu at home, go to work, and after 3-4 hours, of course, next prayer, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. It's like common for every employee, they go use it. I don't take off the shoes.
No.
Just do my wudu.
Remember, we talked about two different things here. We talked about the shoes, and oftentimes people don't wear boots. So if you're wearing just regular shoes, right, which is below the ankle, you cannot wipe off on that.
Yes, above the ankle.
Above the ankle, you can wipe off on it.
But not on shoes, I don't do that. I always...
On the socks. Right, because it's much more comfortable to pray with your socks than your shoes, right? Yeah. So you can just wipe on your socks. How do we wipe on our socks? How do you do it? Bottom and top? Everybody agrees?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Anybody wants to show us how to wipe on the socks? Yeah, you just go like this. That's it. Yeah. We don't wipe on the bottom. Just whatever water, you don't have to bring in new water. Because you wipe on your head, okay, back and forth, okay, and then your ears, inside and out, and then whatever little water is left, because it's symbolic, you just go like this. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Okay, so let's move on to because we have barely 30 minutes. Let's move on to praying while traveling.
Before that, can you elaborate on tayammum? Because that's also...
Tayammum. With the text of from the ayat of the Quran, then you do basically on dust, right? You wipe on your face, and then you wipe on your hands. Some say you do it twice, but one is sufficient because it's symbolic. Okay? Just the face and the hands. That's tayammum. But when do we do tayammum? We're not going to go back to fiqh al-tahara. I'm sorry? There is no water available, or it's pretty scarce, and I need to drink, so I'm not going to basically, be very thirsty. Or I have a medical condition and I cannot, somebody could be in a hospital bed. with all sorts of tubes connected to them, they're not going to be able to get up and make the wudu. So they can do tayammum, and that's a rukhsa from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's called tayammum. You just strike once on, clean sand, right? Wipe your face, and you could do it second time, wipe your hands, or you could do it with one face and hand. Okay? All right, let's move on to the travel part. Okay? Fard is slightly different from sunnah when one is traveling. Okay? But let's talk about the fard for now. I'm about to travel. And I'm going to go, particularly for those who work, in different states, where they travel to different states. Okay? So it's time for Salatul Dhuhr, right? And I'm about to leave to go to the airport. But just heard the adhan. What do I do? Pray 4 rak'ahs and then go. What if I don't have enough time? I just heard the adhan, but I need to catch my flight. What do I do? You still have time. You can go to the airport, check in, do whatever you need to do. And while you're waiting for the plane, can you do qasr now? No. No. Because the time came before you left. Okay? So you pray dhuhr 4 rak'ahs. And then you pray asr 2. Okay? You could do jama'. What if I left home before the time for Salatul Dhuhr? And now I'm at the airport, Allahu Akbar, it's time for dhuhr. 2 rak'ahs. So 2 rak'ahs dhuhr, 2 rak'ahs asr. I can pray jama' taqdeem or jama' ta'khir. Means I can pray, combine asr with dhuhr. Or if I have a short flight and I arrive there at the time, Salat al-Asr, then I can just delay my dhuhr and combine dhuhr with asr. Clear so far? The moment you left the house, you're considered a traveler. Yeah, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ combined salah and he could see the outskirts of, the Medina. He could see that. I'm sorry?
Basically, when your town is behind you, so you
Right.
see you've left your town basically. Then
It doesn't take much now. Once you get in your car, take a couple of turns. It's like, it's not like what it used to be. People traveled on foot or on horses or camels, right? Right? But we want to talk about real life situation where we're here. Yes.
when we go for Umrah, the Hajj,
Okay. Let's leave that for the time of Hajj because that's a different, fiqh altogether. Like what you do in Mina is not what you do when you are in Mecca, in the Haram, right? What you do in Muzdalifah is not what you do in, the Mount of Arafah. Make sense? So that's a different ball game. Okay? But now we're just going to talk about the day-to-day activities. What if I'm traveling overseas? Many of us, when we travel overseas, it takes 7, 8, 10, 12 hours. Even if you're going for Umrah. Right? What do you do now? Do jama' and qasr. Okay, no place on the airplane to make ruku' and sujood. What do I do? Sit in the chair all the time? Some of the scholars objected to that. Yeah. So, وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. So you have to be in a stand-up position. So at least you have to face the Qibla. If you pray in Sunnah, you can face any direction. You can sit down, no problem. But with the Fard, it's different. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he traveled, if he's praying Sunnah, he's on the camel, he's traveling, whatever direction he's traveling in, he prays. But Fard is different. Fard, he would stop and he would combine Dhuhr with Asr or Asr with Dhuhr, Maghrib with Isha or Isha with Maghrib.
So when we combine, so do we Jama Taqdim, Jama Ta'khir? So basically we are taking Dhuhr all the way to the close to Asr.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for example, like
To the time of Asr. To the time of Asr. Yeah. Because again, they say that Dhuhr and Asr has a shared time, and so does Maghrib and Isha. So does, but I'm on an airplane, and that's really the biggest challenge. That is the biggest challenge, is that when you're on an airplane for 11, 12 hours, and now you got like 5 salawat to pray. Oftentimes, Maghrib and Isha, if you're traveling in the morning, is not an issue. Even if you're traveling at night, is not an issue. Why? Because you can pray at the airport. So now you have to worry about Fajr. And if you're traveling east, Fajr comes and goes very quickly. So you have to be really careful. You have to be careful. But one way to do it, with the prevalence of technology now, we can determine, I'm at this point, the time is about this much, right? And this time Fajr. But again, this is not something we do every day. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. But when you're on the airplane, like I said, make sure you put your socks on and you're state of wudu, so you can wipe on your socks. Bathrooms are extremely small, and the sink is like really tiny, right? And again, at one point we were going for Umrah, and almost everybody on the plane is going for Umrah. And what do you know? There's an announcement: we have no more water on the plane. Doesn't that happen? So because we failed to take the rukhsah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us an act of ease. I said, no, I'm a tough person. Yeah, but you have to be considerate of others. You have to be considerate of others. And when you're on the airplane, we talked about this in Fiqh of Salah. We said the limbs you wash 3 times, right? But the obligatory is 1. So on an airplane, you need to do that. Because if you have everybody on the airplane making their wudu, most likely it's 1 wudu, and then you're out of water. I mean, no airline budgets for 3, 4 wudus or more for everybody on the airplane. That's just very unlikely. Very unlikely. And again, you put your socks on and you just wipe on your socks. So that's an act of ease. But when you are praying, you need to be in a standing position. You need to, as much as possible, face in the Qibla. As much as possible. If you travel on some of the Muslim airlines, they usually have a place for Salah, which is very nice. You know which way is the Qibla. There's a place, you can stand up, you can make your ruku', you can make your sujood, you can sit down for the tashahhud. But if there's no place whatsoever on the airplane to pray, you need to be in a standing position while reciting. And again, you could do Jam' and Qasr, if it's Dhuhr and Asr. Or Maghrib and Isha, you could do Jam' and Qasr, right? And Salat al-Fajr is only 2 rak'ahs. And the sunnah is, if you're not traveling, is to prolong your recitation in Salat al-Fajr. But while you're traveling, the sunnah is to recite barely 3 ayat. Or a very short surah. That is the sunnah. Okay? So you can make your recitation while standing up. You can make your ruku'. You can make your ruku' while standing up and rising. The only issue becomes sujood. If there's absolutely no place to make sujood, then just basically you sit and then you would make sujood symbolically. Yes.
I'm traveling somewhere. I'm going back home. And I have like half bottle of water. So like a drinking water. I'm gonna do my wudu on that. So is it gonna be acceptable? Or
You're traveling here in the US?
yeah, somewhere.
You have no excuse, akhi. You have no excuse. I mean, any highway you take, there are rest areas and there's, shopping centers and there are gas stations and there are restrooms and again, you're traveling, you're going to be combining 2 salahs.
I mean, so just think like that. I'm going somewhere. I have to wait over there for 4 or 3 hours, right? There's nothing, near to me to go. And it's
Give me a real scenario, real situation.
It's a real. So I went to somewhere like it's a area, green area.
You leave in Frederick, you're going where?
Yeah, yesterday it's happened to me. I went somewhere to one of the parks and there was
One of?
one of the park and
Okay.
it was a time for salat. I have a bottle of water. It was half. I just do my wuzu and I wait all it was not dry in my hands and I did.
Right, but even the park has restrooms.
No, but he has water.
No, he only has half a bottle of water. You can make wudu with half a bottle, but what I'm saying is that, you know, this is not the good old days where you have to make sure you reach the well to get the water, and all you carry with you is just drinking or cooking water, right? We live in a place where water is like abundant, readily available. Restrooms are everywhere, right? Fair enough, but what we're saying is that there's, in other words, let's say now, realistically, Salat al-Dhuhr comes at 1:08, right? Salat al-Asr is at 4:56. So I have almost 4 hours to pray. In other words, if there's no water available, I don't have to pray right now. If I'm at the park for an hour, 2, I still have time to get back home or to go to the masjid and, you know, make my wudu and pray. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us all this time. Of course, it's better to pray when the time comes, but you still have, you know, the spread. In fact, in some occasions, the Prophet ﷺ combined dhuhr with asr. And the scholar said, jam' suri, meaning that he did not allow the time for dhuhr to completely exit. He just waited till the end, and then he prayed dhuhr, and then he prayed asr. When the Sahaba asked him, he said he didn't want to make it too difficult for his ummah. But again, he didn't do this frequently. He did not do that. He did it a couple of times, 3 times maybe. Al-'ada muhakkama. So you'll find that some scholars basically say 48 miles or something like that, right? But to me, you know, there's another fiqh rule that says nasb al-maqadir bil-ra'yi mumtani', meaning that coming up with a number, because I've done my own ijtihad and that's my own thinking, you know, with no evidence, that is not acceptable. So if someone is going to come and say 48 miles, does that mean if I travel 47, it's a no? You see the thing? And does that mean if I'm traveling by car, is the same I'm traveling on foot? Right? So therefore, the question you got to ask yourself, am I really traveling? Am I really traveling?
Is it considered traveling by the people?
Exactly. So that's what we're saying. Al-'ada muhakkama means that we'll go back to the tradition. If someone lives in a village, and that's the way, there's so many villages where people they don't see cars. They don't even have streets. So if someone is going from one village to the next and it's like 10, 15 miles away, how many hours would that take them if they're traveling on foot? Yeah, so they're traveling. In their tradition, I'm traveling. So that's not even 25% of what some of the scholars have said as far as the 48 miles. If we come and say, oh, it has to be 48 miles, it's like, what do you mean? You know, I'm not going to make it same day. It may take me 2 days. All right? So it goes back to the tradition. Do I really feel like I'm traveling? Right? So in other words, I drove from Rockville, right, to the masjid here. It's about 35 miles. What if I'm going to Hagerstown? It's about 50 miles. Does that mean I'm traveling? In my mind, I'm not traveling, really. I'm just going to the masjid and I'm heading back.
So what happened if you stay overnight?
Well, that's a different story.
Like you're staying like...
Then we're not talking about 48 miles anymore. We're talking about I left town and I'm going to spend the night in another town. So to me, I'm traveling now. Yeah, because I'm not home anymore. I left my house and I went to another town and I'm spending the night in a hotel or a friend's house or a relative, whatever. So you just get asked. Some scholars said if you leave one state and go to the next, and we talked about this in the khutab when it came to fasting. You go to another state, right? That means you're traveling. What if you live on the border? Right? It's like, between you and the next state is like 1 mile or even less. I just traveled. What if you live in one state that's sort of like the travel distance from north to south is about 6-7 hours? No, you're still in the same state. No, that doesn't make any sense. I'm traveling. It really goes back to the urf, akhi. Goes back to the tradition. What people in that town would consider to be a travel. I'll give you another example, bring this a little closer to people's minds. If someone wants to get married, okay, and they never really discuss the dowry, right? He just bought a small gift, for his bride, and when the time came for writing the contract, they basically said, okay, so what is the mahr? It's like, what are you talking about mahr? Yes, we didn't. But the urf, the tradition, is that a woman in this town, right, or in this status, or in this society, her mahr is $5,000. Even though you didn't discuss that, that is the urf. That's what we agree to. So that's why the scholars say, in this case, al-'ada muhakkama. Unless there's a pre-agreement, right, then the tradition rules. Does that make sense? Okay, inshallah. So that's with respect to travel. Now the question is, when you leave one town and you go to the next, okay? Of course, some scholars left it open-ended in terms of doing jam' and qasr. So long that you're traveling, it could be a month, 2 or 3, you could do jam' and qasr. Some said no, it's just 3 days, meaning that's 16 salahs. Some said it's 4 days, 21 salahs. Okay? Some say, even if you're traveling for 2 or 3 days, if you have 2 homes in 2 different states or 2 different towns, and you leave this home and you go to this home, you're not traveling. This is your home and this is your home. Right? So it's a rukhsa. It's an act of ease, it's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you need to exercise your judgment. But the opinions are there. There are many opinions. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ أَن تُؤْتَى رُخَصَهُ كَمَا يُحِبُّ أَن تُؤْتَى عَزَائِمَهُ. Just like when something that is difficult or tough required of you. I'm sorry, sister, you're raising your hand? Yes. Let me just finish this thought, inshallah, and then just like something difficult is required of you to do, then you do it. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offers you, something of ease, then you take that as well. Yeah. Yes, sister.
If you have wudu, but you fell asleep while you were sitting on a plane or in a car, do you have to redo the wudu when you wake up, or do you still have
Okay. Notice that she said while you were sitting. Okay. So if you're sitting, right? In other words, you're not reclining, you're this and that, and then you doze off and then you wake up, you don't have to do your wudu. But if you're lying down, you have to do your wudu. Why is that? Because when you're sitting down, it's very difficult to really pass wind when you're sitting down in a position that is, you're stuck to a chair. Make sense? And also, again, if you slept for a very long time, then you make your wudu. But if you're lying down and you fell asleep, then most likely, oftentimes, you notice that when people lie down flat, they pass wind. But when they're sitting, they're not passing wind. We're talking about sitting in a chair. Okay? So, but again, making wudu in and of itself is an act of ibadah. Every time you wash a limb, sins fall off of your body. And if you fell asleep, it might be refreshing, and more of a preparation for salah to achieve your khushu' is that you would get up and you would make your wudu. Right? Some opinions say that no, you have to be certain that you have your wudu. Meaning that one of the fiqh rules in Islam, الْيَقِينُ لَا يَزُولُ بِالشَّكِّ. If I'm certain about something and then I have a doubt that if I still have it or not, I just remove the doubt and I keep what I'm certain about. Meaning that I'm certain I've made my wudu before I came to the masjid. Along the way, I'm beginning to doubt whether I lost my wudu or not. My wudu is valid. Even though there's some opinions say, no, you have to be certain that your wudu is valid. Why? Because the salah is the pillar of Islam. But the majority of scholars, they look at it as, following the fiqh rule, and knowing these rules and following them will keep shaitan at bay, will keep Satan at bay. Okay? Because people who don't know, they're an easy prey for Satan.
people are doing purposely, like I see in this mosque, they are coming and they're doing like 2 rak'ah, salatul,
تحية المسجد. So تحية المسجد.
they're coming from travel and they're just doing 2 rak'ah, and it's not taking like, just think it's asr, it's not taking like more than 5 minutes to complete your salah. But I asked why, and they said you just follow the sunnah.
No. Some people pray too fast. We said that one of the pillars of salah is achieving khushu'. In every rukn, in every pillar. Okay? So those who are going through the motions and their mind is elsewhere, they really have not prayed. And also, even if you're traveling, if I'm traveling and I haven't prayed my dhuhr and asr yet, and I come here at the time of asr and they're praying asr, what do? Join them, make niyyah for dhuhr, but what if they just started and they're praying 4 rak'ahs, what do? You do 4 rak'ahs. You're obligated to follow the imam. You're obligated to follow the imam. And when they finish, then you pray 2 rak'ahs for Salat al-Asr.